Bray Wyatt's return generated a whole heap of positive fanfare, really got fans talking, and for a while went really well, but the return of the man who'd fired, sought to rehire him, and then returned after ignominy of the highest order really did strike what seems to be a near fatal blow in the form of simply the return of Vince McMahon. We're going to talk Bray Wyatt, we're going to talk everything that's happened, everything that's gone wrong, where he is now, and where we expect him to return. So strap yourselves in, because after I already reported when he'd be returning, this may be something you want to keep an eye on. So I want to go back to the days in which Bray Wyatt began his return. This was, of course, when we were seeing the bunny signia, the rabbit, as it were, the white rabbit popping up all over backstage, with clear indications of a number of different people, including a lean towards Karrion Kross, who's portrayed a white rabbit character beforehand. This is important, bear with me. When it comes to Bray Wyatt, his intention was not to return to wrestling. In fact, he did have a lot more that he was working on, irons in the fire as it were, when it comes to the world of Hollywood and Hollywood movies. This is not quite what has panned out, because he's put those ambitions on hold to be the master of horror, Benicio del Toro style, put them on hold to return to wrestling. Now, these negotiations to return did start under Vince McMahon, when Bray Wyatt was simply open to a lot more change. The Roman Reigns storyline in particular, the efforts that were being made with lower down the tier characters such as Gunther, for example, there was a belief, with the writing as it was, that Bray Wyatt would get a fair chance this time round, and time does heal all wounds. So Bray Wyatt was open to returning when being contacted by initially Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon was to leave the company before these negotiations did become official, but Triple H stepped into that gap and was more than happy to offer Bray Wyatt limited creative control over his character. This was the big sticking point when it comes to Bray Wyatt. He wanted an element of control over who his character was, what his character did, and going forwards, who his character would work with. Again, this is quite important. Bray Wyatt did write his own planned return, did write his own promos in which he initially was featuring as Wyndham Rotunda and talking to people as himself, and then started the writing for Uncle Howdy. The appearance of the Wyatt Six, or at least the 6 incarnations of characters that have been with Bray Wyatt from the beginning, was with a clear intention. We also are yet to see the character Uncle Harper, which was trademarked with an intention to be displayed as a Bray Wyatt character. Another change that was made almost immediately to presentation. Bray Wyatt, put simply, requested a number of different people to be in the Wyatt Six, some of which were lower down the card, some of which were higher up the card, some of which were Braun Strowman. And this caused a few issues, because while Bray Wyatt was told you do have some control, you can make some choices, he didn't get any of the choices he was looking for. He signed a deal, made his return, and almost everything that he pitched immediately fell on deaf ears. This naturally caused a lot of issues. This wasn't just down to creative, this wasn't almost in any way down to Triple H. It was actually wrestlers themselves who were not happy with the idea of working with or under Bray Wyatt. There are a number of wrestlers who were excited by the idea, but they would have made very little impact because of their current position on the card. I will once again mention Karrion Kross at this point. I don't feel I need to go into detail as to why that could potentially elevate him, given how rough his time has been on the main roster since his return. The only person who actually did choose to step into that gap was LA Knight. Now, LA Knight, as you'll have seen in a previous video, was not exactly getting the push that he'd been promised at this point in time, but an opportunity against someone of Bray Wyatt's name value did create something which we are really seeing blossom as we speak. LA Knight's big moments recently all started with the platform he was given by his association with and feud against Bray Wyatt, and he benefited hugely from this. I do liken it to Chris Jericho working with China for the Intercontinental Championship way back when. Certainly, the backstage stories that have come out since do not portray it in the same light as it was portrayed at the time, but at the time it certainly looked like Chris Jericho was taking a huge opportunity with the ability to work with someone that a lot of people in the back were not willing to work with. This is, of course, a difficult situation going forwards, because this means that Bray Wyatt was already having to rewrite his storylines to fit wrestlers, and in fact had to rewrite everything he had planned with Uncle Howdy to fit, the moment with LA Knight. Now, there was further disappointment when it came to the actual in-ring debut of Bray Wyatt. The match at Royal Rumble was cut for time because of matches before it going over, and this caused multiple issues, particularly that Bray Wyatt couldn't have all of the spots that he was looking for. He couldn't draw as much attention to the Wyatt Six and their appearances as well, and he couldn't really debut the character he was trying to debut, which was a variation of The Fiend. In fact, there was a lot of dispute over this variation of The Fiend, because a promise was made that we would not see The Fiend again. A large part of this, of course, was to try and convince wrestlers to work with Bray Wyatt again. People did not want to work with The Fiend. The Fiend was unbeatable. Nobody came out of that looking good. This is also true of Roman Reigns at the moment. There are a couple of wrestlers that maybe don't fancy it anymore, but if you're working with Roman Reigns, you're almost guaranteed a main event, whereas with the Royal Rumble and with Bray Wyatt, you're not guaranteed anything. It's a difficult position to go walking into, so there was definitely some disappointment there. Bray Wyatt was writing something new, including a tag team with Uncle Howdy and something for the Wyatt Six, when we started getting closer to WrestleMania and Vince McMahon returned. This was, in many ways, not the beginning of the end, but the beginning of the situation we find now, where Bray Wyatt is gone for the foreseeable and we don't know where he is again. Vince McMahon essentially wanted to ensure that Bray Wyatt was showcased, was properly platformed, and had an opportunity to do what he wanted to do. So Vince McMahon said to Bray Wyatt, I'm going to give you a huge match at WrestleMania, and I want you to write the storyline. I'm going to give you Bobby Lashley. This was the end of the interrupted storyline that was going to take place at WrestleMania, Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley in one final bout. It also created the Omos versus Brock Lesnar feud, when Brock Lesnar was essentially told, who do you want to work with? And he said, I'll take on Omos. Why not? This, of course, caused more problems when you consider that Bobby Lashley was told he'd be feuding with this supernatural guy, and good luck to you. This played out very similar to Alexa Bliss versus Shayna Baszler many moons ago, where there was a storyline, there was a few segments, and then everyone involved said, I don't want to keep doing this, because no one wants to keep watching it. This basically is how we got to where we were. There have been a number of physical injuries that have limited Bray Wyatt, in addition to some of the creative issues that are hamstringing him. Basically, every time he had a few house show matches, he'd pick up something just out of pure bad luck. A large part of that is undoubtedly ring rust, but Bray Wyatt wrestled less than 10 matches in the almost year that he has been back so far, and only one of them was actually on television. Only one. They did try and keep the Bray Wyatt storyline going using Uncle Howdy, but Bray Wyatt eventually just stopped writing it, and Uncle Howdy, who was supposed to be portrayed as something unstoppable, maybe sneaking in the concept of The Fiend, was made to look foolish by Bobby Lashley. This is a natural part of wrestling that Vince McMahon and Triple H wrote, and Bray Wyatt is said to have been very unhappy that his character was written without him and the treatment of the character in general. Bray Wyatt skipped WrestleMania due to injuries and creative differences, and since then he has rejected almost all creative plans to return. Injuries are not enough to keep a character like Bray Wyatt off screens when you consider that he spent 4 months without wrestling a single match before his actual debut match under this guise. The man could come back as a manager. He could come back in the lead of the Wyatt Six. None of these storylines have so far been accepted. The WWE and the creative team essentially are trying to make Bray Wyatt fit the wrestling world, whereas Bray Wyatt seems to be trying to get the wrestling world to fit Bray Wyatt. Both sides have struggled to get anything accepted by the other. It is causing a lot of ongoing issues. Now, Triple H has made it clear he will not force wrestlers to work with Bray Wyatt, and that is causing all of this to come to a standstill because, even now, wrestlers are not excited by the idea of working with Bray Wyatt. This current situation of nearly a year, where no one's really benefited apart from LA Knight, has caused a lot of unhappy people, particularly when it comes to the amount of airtime that was given to someone who then vanished. Not everyone is happy to give Bray Wyatt the benefit of the doubt, and in many ways I do feel that's a shame, but I can actually understand the situation there. Vince McMahon has tried and failed to come up with storylines that work for Bray Wyatt until recently. Just before SummerSlam time, a storyline was pitched that apparently there has been agreement on. Vince McMahon is said to have stepped back and chosen not to be involved in any of this. As you will undoubtedly know, there was a world of fake news swirling around Bray Wyatt's appearance at SummerSlam. It did not happen, and it's important that we all remember who reported those false reports, because more than 1 million people saw a tweet about that, which was entirely false, and the person who tweeted it has gained a lot of revenue, engagement, followers, and growth since. So they have benefited from this lie massively, and they've not been punished for it whatsoever. Bray Wyatt was never going to return at SummerSlam. In fact, to be blunt, we don't know when Bray Wyatt is going to return. I expect that they are trying as hard as they can not to let this get to a full year, but that is coming quicker than you can possibly imagine. I do not expect Bray Wyatt to feature at next year's WrestleMania. That's where we are now with this. Those are the latest updates on Bray Wyatt. That's where we are and how we got there. Be sure to hit like and subscribe for more information as it comes out. There will be plenty more, I promise you, but until then, I've been Tom Colohue. Thank you for watching.